Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of the Reef Life with myself, Dutch Reefer. In this video, we'll be covering the second phase of a new tank, the dial-in period. Before watching this video, I would recommend watching the previous video, which is about setting up the tank, choosing your rocks, choosing your sand, some considerations about building up your reefscape, and much more. So in this video, I will be covering the past 4 to 5 weeks that have gone past since making the last video, where I'm explaining on how to set up the reef tank initially. So in the meantime, everything is up and running. There's power, as you can see right there. There's lights, as you can see right here. The reefscape has been built, as you can see right here. And there's actually already a couple of corals in here. Now the reason I've added some corals in this tank while it's in its dial-in period is that a friend of mine has quit reefing in the past few weeks. So he had a couple of corals that were left over that he didn't have a place for. So I said, well, I can add them to the tank to see how they're doing as kind of a canary in the new reef tank, just to see if the tank is ready to add corals and or other creatures. There's also a couple of snails in here, as you can see right here on the sand. And there's a couple as well on the rocks, which might come across in the next couple of minutes. So let's start off with the most obvious thing, the water. So the water in this tank has been pre-mixed. And the reason, or the way I've done this is just add the reverse osmosis water into the tank and then mix the salt in the tank itself. It's the easiest way to prepare your salt after making sure that your tank has no leaks. So first, always test your overflow, at least your overflow, to see if your tank is not leaking, because in that case you will need to do some pipe work before going any further. Luckily this tank wasn't leaking, so I added reverse osmosis water up until about here, when it doesn't overflow into the overflow box, and then start mixing it with salt until it's the right level, and then eventually add more to fill up the sump as well. Today, by the way, I'm joined by our dog Moana, so let's hope she stays quiet for the rest of the video. So the water was pre-mixed, and then after that I started gluing my rocks together into a reefscape that you can see right here and here. So this part, let's start off with this part, it's actually a very simple, easy part. Just one aquaforest rock right here and one branch glued together, as you can see right here on the side. There's glue on 3 different places to make sure that it holds. The same goes for the reefscape itself. First, I've made a outline of what I was going to make on the ground, and then after that, after I got the approval from the wife as well, then I started gluing it together. And as you can see, there's all kinds of connections that I've made with the 2-component glue that I've shown you in the previous video. You can see it on various places inside the reef. So the reason I'm using that is that it's very flexible to use. You can easily mix it together. It's 2 components. It's kind of a clay. You mix it together, you apply it, and it's pretty sturdy right away. After a couple of hours or days, it has gone completely solid, and as you can see, a reef tank or a reefscape emerges. I was actually looking into somewhat more of a open reefscape this time. Usually I try to make an open reefscape, but this time I wanted it to be really open. So I've used a lot of rocks from Aquaforest. So these are the arches. It's an arch. This is two arches glued together. Here's another arch. Here's two shelves and another shelf. So actually three. 1, 2, 3, and then another arch on top. So the whole reef consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 arches, 1, 2, 3 shelves, and 1 branch right here. So it's a pretty easy reefscape with not a lot of complexity to it, but still gives me a lot of flexibility to work with the corals and the fish, and it gives enough hiding spaces for the fish to feel comfortable after the dial-in period has ended. So like I mentioned, I'm still in week 5, so I'm still quite early, and that's why there's not a lot of life in the tank yet, other than the corals that I've shown you earlier in this video. Those are there just as a measuring to see how well the tank is doing, to see if it's ready for more life. But of course, it's not just that. You also need to measure your water parameters in the first couple of months that your tank is running. And there's of course a couple of ways to speed up the dial-in process. One of them that I'm actively doing is adding bacteria. So I'm adding 2 types of bacteria. First of all, the Polyp Lab Genesis, which is a recommended type of bacteria that I have been using for the past 2 years, which have yielded me great results. And another one is a local brand called Colombo, which has a Bactostart mix. And if you haven't already, you can check out the there's a topic on Reef to Reef. It's a fairly recent topic where the bottled bacteria are being discussed, and one of the conclusions from that is that bottled bacteria actually work. It doesn't really matter what brand you're using, just make sure that it's a common brand, so you know that you're not adding any pollutants to your water. But if it's a common brand, it's bacteria, it will be beneficial to your tank in the long run. To facilitate the growth of these bacteria, there's not just this rock, because of course it's great to have rock in your tank, but this is not enough kilograms to host all of the bacteria. So I have been using, and I have been using that for a long time, Maxspect bio balls in my tank, and also 2 of the blocks underneath. And then there's another egg crate bin with more of these bio balls in there. As you can see, some of them are grown with sponge, and that's because they're bio balls from 3 different tanks. So these bottom ones are new ones, these are from a tank from one of my mates, and the top ones are from a tank from another mate. So that means there's 3 different ecosystems of bacteria that are going to settle in this new tank, and that's a very good way to start off your new reef, by adding a lot of various and different bacteria strains from well-established tanks. As you can see, the skimmer in here, which is a Ñyos Quantum 160, a new skimmer that I acquired especially for this tank, is already doing pretty well. Currently the foam is a bit low, and that's because I've been fiddling with the water a bit in the last few hours, but normally, as you can see, the foam is there and it's making a nice brown skimmate, which smells delightful. Other than that, there's also the ReefMat that I've been using since I acquired this tank 1.5 years ago, and this ReefMat, I think it's really a very good and very usable product that in any way, shape or form should be in any reef tank, because there's various brands. This one is from Red Sea, but there's other brands as well, and using one of these will clear up your tank by it's unmanageable. If you're not using one and you start using one, you will see your water clear up immediately, and it takes out a lot of the dirt that would normally still be in the water if you weren't using one. As you can see right here, these are all, well, gunk and dust and dirt, and it's being caught by the filter. So I can definitely recommend using a ReefMat in any way, shape or form. Next up is the additions. I have been using additions for quite a while. I don't think it's completely necessary to add them yet, but I've already installed them with a very minimal dose, which are just the normal alkalinity, magnesium and calcium additions, just to make sure that the tank is running as I want it to. Now, before adding any other creatures and inhabitants, I want the water to be at least safe. So the current parameters that I'm monitoring are the nitrite, the ammonia, the pH value and the salinity. As you can see, I've measured twice now. There's still some nitrite inside the tank, NO2. There's still some ammonia, but it's decreasing. The pH is pretty stable and the salinity is around 1.025, which is on point for a reef tank. So once these values reach 0, the NO2 and the NH3, that's the point where I can safely start adding more corals and or fish/invertebrates. But for now, I'll refrain from doing that. And of course, once these two are at 0.0, I will also start measuring the alkalinity, the calcium, the magnesium, and the phosphates and the nitrates inside this tank, just to make sure that it's a good environment for reef tank inhabitants to live in. So one last topic that I haven't covered yet is the reverse osmosis addition. I wanted to start using the supplied tank that's there with when you buy a Red Sea tank, but it takes up a lot of space inside the sump. So I reverted back to the old method, which is just a jerry can of reverse osmosis water using an optical sensor to detect when the water level is too low. As you can see right here, it's the green dot. So once the water level decreases, some reverse osmosis water gets added to the tank. So yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have learned something from it, or at the very least enjoyed the past few minutes. I'm going to give you a quick rundown before ending this video with the current corals that are inside the tank, and then it's off to the next one. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.